The bridge of the human ship Defiant was quiet except for the soft hum of computers. Commander Jake Harrison stood with his hands behind his back, watching the main screen that showed the dark space around Earth. His brown eyes stayed calm even. As 10 massive alien ships appeared from nowhere, their hulls gleaming silver in the starlight, each alien ship was 3 times bigger than any human vessel. They moved in perfect formation, surrounding Earth like hungry wolves circling their prey. The ships belonged to the Zephyrian Empire, a race of blue-scaled warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds across the galaxy. "Sir, we're getting a communication request," said Lieutenant Amy Ross from her station. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the tension underneath. "Put it through," Jake replied. The main screen flickered and showed the face of Admiral Vera Kane, the Zephyrian fleet commander. Her blue scales caught the light from her ship's bridge, and her yellow eyes held the cold confidence of someone who had never known defeat. Sharp teeth showed when she smiled, and that smile made Jake's crew shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Humans," Admiral Kane said, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "I am Admiral Vera Kane of the Zephyrian Empire." "You have caused us considerable trouble." Jake said nothing. He just watched and waited. Kane continued, "For months, we have tested your resolve. We destroyed your colonies on Titan Base. We crushed your mining operations on Europa. We turned your ships into floating scrap metal. Each time you rebuilt. Each time you came back for more punishment." Behind Jake, his crew worked at their stations. Dr. Lisa Grant monitored the ship's systems from her science station. "Captain." Roy Blake stood ready at the weapons console. They all knew this moment would come eventually. The Zephyrians had been pushing humanity for almost a year, attacking outer settlements and demanding tribute. "Your species has proven more stubborn than most," Kane said, her smile growing wider. "But this ends today. Look around you, human. Count my ships." Jake's tactical officer, Colonel Pete Morris, quietly reported, 10 ships confirmed, sir. All battle cruisers. Each one carries enough firepower to destroy a planet." Admiral Kane heard the report through the open channel and laughed. The sound was like broken glass scraping against metal. "You hear that, Commander Harrison? Yes, I know your name. I know all about you. 10 of my strongest warships now surround your pathetic little world." She leaned forward in her command chair, her claws clicking against the armrests. "Each one of these ships could turn your Earth into a ball of molten rock. Together, they could crack your planet in half. Your defenses are nothing compared to our power." Jake remained silent, but his mind was working. He studied the tactical display showing the positions of Kane's ships. They had indeed surrounded Earth, blocking all major escape routes. It was a classic Zephyrian tactic. Surround, intimidate, then demand surrender. "I will make this simple for you," Kane continued. "You have 2 choices. First, you can surrender now. Your species will serve the Empire as slaves. You will mine our minerals, build our ships, and clean our waste. Your children will know only servitude, but they will live." The bridge crew tensed. Jake heard someone's breathing quicken, but he kept his expression calm. "Your second choice," Kane said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "is death. We will kill every human on your planet. Your cities will burn, your oceans will boil, your atmosphere will be stripped away until nothing remains but dead rock floating in space." Captain Nina Walsh, who had been monitoring long-range sensors, quietly reported, "Sir, more Zephyrian ships are holding position just outside our solar system, at least 50 more vessels." Kane's smile became even more predatory. "You see, Commander? This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact. You are finished. Your species ends here, one way or another," Jake finally spoke. His voice was quiet but clear. "And if we refuse both options?" Kane laughed again. "Refuse? You think you have a third choice?" "Look at your screens, human. Look at the size of my ships. Look at the power readings from our weapons. What could you possibly do against the might of the Zephyrian Empire? Your colonies fell like houses of cards," she continued. "Your fleet scattered, like frightened birds. Your technology is centuries behind ours. You have nothing we fear. The Admiral stood up from her chair and walked closer to the camera. Her reflection showed on the screen of every human ship listening to the broadcast. "You're encircled by my strongest 10, she said, spreading her arms wide. "Each captain under my command has destroyed more worlds than you have ships. Each weapon on each ship has ended more lives than exist in your entire pathetic civilization." She paused, letting the words sink in. Around Earth, her 10 massive ships moved into attack formation. Their weapons began to glow with stored energy, ready to fire on command. "So I ask you again, Commander Harrison, will you surrender and live as slaves, or will you choose death for your entire species?" Jake looked around his bridge. His crew was watching him, waiting for his decision. Some looked scared, others looked angry, but all of them looked determined. These men and women had volunteered to serve on the front lines. Knowing this day might come, he thought about Earth below them. Billions of humans going about their daily lives, most of them unaware that their fate was being decided in the darkness. Of space, children playing in parks, families eating dinner together, students studying in schools. All of them depending on decisions made by people like him. Jake also thought about the colonies the Zephyrians had destroyed, the mining stations they had crushed, the cargo ships they had vaporized. Thousands of humans had died in those attacks, and the Zephyrians had felt nothing. To them, humans were just another species to be conquered or eliminated, but there was something Admiral Kane didn't know, something the Zephyrians had never suspected. Jake looked at the tactical display one more time, noting the precise positions of the enemy ships. Perfect. They were exactly where he had hoped they would be. "Commander?" Kane's voice cut through his thoughts. "I'm waiting for your answer. Though I suppose it doesn't matter what you say. The result will be the same." Jake turned back to face the screen. His expression was still calm, but now there was something else there. Something that made Kane's confident smile falter slightly. "You're encircled by my strongest 10, she said. Again, but this time her voice carried a hint of uncertainty. She laughed, but the sound was forced. "What could you possibly do against such overwhelming power?" Jake Harrison, commander of the human ship Defiant, defender of Earth and protector of humanity, looked directly into Admiral Kane's yellow eyes. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried across the bridge to every human listening throughout. "The solar system. Good," he said. "I'm tired of waiting." Kane's smile disappeared completely. Something in the human's tone made her step back from the camera. Around Earth, her 10 powerful ships maintained their attack formation, but suddenly she wasn't entirely sure who was surrounded and who was doing the surrounding. Jake's words echoed in the sudden silence, and for the first time in her military career, Admiral Vera Kane of the Zephyrian Empire felt the cold touch of uncertainty. Admiral Kane stared at the human commander on her screen. Something about Jake Harrison's calm words sent a chill down her spine. She had conquered 47 worlds for the Zephyrian Empire. She had seen fear in the eyes of countless species, as they realized their end had come. But this human showed no fear at all. "What did you say?" Kane asked, her voice sharper than before. Jake didn't repeat himself. Instead, he looked at Dr. Lisa Grant at the science station. "Doctor, please activate the network." Dr. Grant's fingers moved across her console with practiced speed. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains on Earth, massive computers came online. Systems that had been hidden for over a century began to wake up. Lisa had spent her entire career preparing for this moment, and now it was finally here. "Network activation?" "In progress," she reported, all stations responding. Kane watched the exchange with growing confusion. "What network? What are you talking about?" On Earth's surface, what looked like simple communication towers began to change. Metal panels slid away to reveal advanced technology that looked nothing like the primitive equipment the Zephyrians had seen humans use before. These weren't communication towers at all. They were weapon platforms that had been disguised for decades. Captain Roy Blake stood at his weapons console, watching readouts that showed him the position of every Zephyrian ship. "Sir, all targets are locked. Orbital platforms report ready." "Status." Kane's yellow eyes narrowed. "Orbital platforms?" Our scans showed no significant weapons in Earth's orbit. That's because you weren't looking hard enough, Jake said quietly. Around Earth, pieces of what the Zephyrians had thought was space junk began to move. Old satellites that had been drifting for years suddenly came to life. Chunks of metal that looked like debris from ancient battles started to unfold like deadly flowers. Each piece revealed hidden weapons and shield generators. Colonel Pete Morris smiled as he watched his console. Phase 1 complete, sir. All decoy systems are powering down. Real defenses are coming online. Kane's bridge crew began shouting warnings. Their sensors were picking up massive energy signatures from what had appeared to be empty space just moments before. The humans hadn't been sitting helpless around their planet. They had been hiding an entire fleet. Impossible, Kane whispered. Our sensors would have detected any large ships. Your sensors detected exactly what we wanted them to detect, Jake explained. For the past 100 years, we've been preparing for this day. Every time you attacked one of our colonies, we learned something new about your weapons. Every time you destroyed one of our ships, we studied the wreckage to understand your technology. On the far side of Earth's moon, Captain Nina Walsh gave orders to her hidden fleet. All ships begin decloak sequence. Let's show them what we've really been building. One by one, human ships began to appear throughout the solar system. They weren't the crude vessels the Zephyrians had seen before. These were sleek, advanced warships that incorporated technology from dozens of alien species. Each ship was designed specifically to counter Zephyrian weapons and tactics. Kane's tactical officer, a young Zephyrian named Vex, reported with panic in his voice. Admiral, we're detecting over 300 human vessels. They're everywhere. Behind asteroids, in the shadow of planets, even inside the asteroid belt. 300? Kane's voice cracked. That's impossible. We destroyed most of their fleet months ago. Jake's expression remained calm. You destroyed the ships we wanted you to destroy, the old ones. The ones we built to look impressive, but were actually just decoys filled with recording equipment. Every battle you fought against us, every weapon you used, every tactic you employed, we recorded it all. Dr. Grant looked up from her console. Sir, we're receiving confirmation from deep space monitoring stations. The real human fleet is in position. Kane began to understand the horrible truth. You mean those weren't real battles? Your colonists, your miners, your cargo ships, they were all fake? Not fake, Jake corrected. Strategic. The colonies you destroyed were real, but they were built specifically to gather intelligence about your empire. The people who lived there volunteered for the mission. They knew they might die, but they also knew their sacrifice would save billions of lives. The Admiral's hands shook as she gripped her command chair. But we killed thousands of your people. We watched your ships explode. We saw your bases burning. Yes, Jake said simply. War has a cost. But every person who died in those attacks died knowing they were helping to save humanity. Their deaths weren't meaningless. They were part of a plan over a century in the making. Captain Walsh's voice came through the communication system from her hidden fleet. Admiral Harrison, this is Captain Walsh reporting. Deep Space Fleet is ready for engagement. We have the enemy completely surrounded. Kane looked at her own tactical display and felt her blood turn cold. Her 10 powerful ships were no longer surrounding Earth. Instead, they were trapped in the middle of the largest human fleet ever assembled. Hundreds of advanced warships had appeared from nowhere, each one aimed at her forces. How? She whispered. How did you hide so many ships? We didn't hide them, Jake explained. We built them. While you were busy conquering other worlds, we were busy preparing for you. Every piece of technology you used against us, we studied and improved. Every tactic you employed, we developed counters for. Every weakness we discovered, we prepared to exploit. Roy Blake's console lit up with weapon locks. Sir, all enemy. Vessels are targeted, awaiting orders. Kane realized she had walked into a trap that had been set long before she was even born. You've been planning this for over a century? That's impossible. No species thinks that far ahead. Humans do, Jake said. We learned about your empire from the first species you conquered. They told us about your tactics, your technology, your weaknesses. We spent generations preparing for this day. Dr. Grant added, every destroyed colony transmitted data back to Earth before its destruction. Every captured human ship contained hidden surveillance equipment. Every prisoner you took had been trained to gather intelligence about your empire. Kane's communications officer reported, Admiral, we're receiving distress signals from across the empire. Human-led forces are attacking our bases on 17 different worlds. 17? Kane's voice was barely audible. This isn't just about Earth, Jake explained. This is about freedom for every species your empire has enslaved. While you've been focused on humanity, we've been building alliances with every race you've conquered. Today, they all strike back. Nina Walsh's fleet moved closer to the trapped Zephyrian ships. Admiral Kane, this is Captain Walsh. I suggest you power down your weapons and prepare to surrender. You're outnumbered 50-1. Kane looked around her bridge at her crew. These were some of the finest warriors in the Zephyrian Empire, but they all looked terrified. They had never faced a situation like this before. Commander Harrison, Kane said, her voice defeated. What do you want from us? Jake's expression softened slightly. What we've always wanted, Admiral. Peace. The chance for all species to live free from the fear of conquest. The end of the Zephyrian Empire's reign of terror. And if we refuse? Then you'll learn why humans are called the most dangerous species. In the galaxy when we're backed into a corner, Jake replied. But I'd prefer not to find out. Too many people have died already. Kane looked at her tactical display one more time. Her 10 strongest ships were completely surrounded by an enemy that had been preparing for this moment for over a century. The trap was perfect, and she had walked right into it. You were never the prey, she whispered, finally understanding. We were, Jake nodded. Good, now let's talk about surrender. Admiral Kane stared at the tactical display showing hundreds of human ships surrounding her fleet. Her claws dug into the armrests of her command chair as she realized the full scope of the trap she had walked into. But she was still a Zephyrian warrior, and warriors didn't surrender without a fight. All ships, she commanded through her fleet communication system. Attack formation, target the largest human vessels first. Show them what Zephyrian power really means. Her 10 battlecruisers moved into their deadly formation, weapons charging with enough energy to destroy planets. Each ship was a masterpiece of Zephyrian engineering, built to dominate any battlefield. Kane had used these same ships to crush the defenses of 47 worlds. Fire all weapons, she ordered. The space around Earth lit up with brilliant energy beams and explosive projectiles. The Zephyrian ships unleashed their full power, expecting to see human vessels explode in spectacular displays of destruction. This was how every battle had always ended for the Zephyrian Empire, but something was wrong. The human ships didn't explode. Instead, they seemed to absorb the energy attacks and deflect the projectiles with ease. Their shields held strong against weapons that should have vaporized them instantly. Impossible, Kane whispered. Nothing can withstand that much firepower. Jake Harrison watched the enemy attack from his bridge with calm satisfaction. Dr. Grant, how are our shields holding? All ships report minimal damage, sir, Lisa replied. The new adaptive shielding is working perfectly. We're actually storing some of their energy for our own use. Kane's weapons officer reported, Admiral, our weapons are having no effect. Their shields are absorbing our attacks. And then use more. Power, Kane snapped. Maximum output on all weapons. The Zephyrian ships increased their fire, pouring even more energy into their attacks. But the human vessels continued to advance, their shields growing brighter as they absorbed the incoming fire. It was like watching water bounce off a rock. Captain. Roy Blake smiled as he watched his console. Sir, enemy weapons are actually charging our power cores. Should I return fire? Not yet, Jake said. Let them exhaust themselves first. Colonel Morris, what's the status of our ground-based defenses? Colonel Pete Morris looked up from his station with a grin. All kinetic platforms are ready, sir. The Zephyrians have no idea what's about to hit them. On Earth's surface, what looked like ordinary mountains began to open up. Hidden inside were massive railgun installations that had been built over decades. Each one could launch projectiles at incredible speeds, turning simple chunks of metal into devastating weapons. "Fire the mountain guns," Jake ordered. The hidden railguns launched their projectiles into space. To the Zephyrians, it looked like Earth itself was shooting at them. Massive metal rods traveling at impossible speeds slammed into Kane's ships. Punching through armor that had never been penetrated before, Kane's flagship shook as one of the projectiles hit its port side. Alarms blared throughout the bridge as damage reports flooded in. "Hull breach on decks 7 through 12, her damage control officer reported. "We're losing atmosphere." "How are they doing this?" Kane demanded. "Those projectiles are moving faster than our fastest missiles." Captain Nina Walsh's voice came through the communication system from her hidden fleet. "Admiral Kane, those are kinetic bombardment weapons. We've been perfecting them for decades. They don't use explosives. They don't need to. Pure kinetic energy at those speeds can crack a moon." Kane looked at her tactical display again. Her 10 ships were taking heavy damage from the Earth-based weapons, while the human fleet continued to advance. But she still had one advantage. Her ships were bigger and more heavily armed than anything the humans had ever built. "All ships, focus fire on the human flagship," she ordered. "If we can destroy their commander, the rest will flee." The 10 Zephyrian battle cruisers turned their combined firepower toward Jake's ship, the Defiant. The amount of energy directed at the single human vessel was enough to vaporize an entire city. The space around the ship became an inferno of deadly radiation and explosive force, but the Defiant didn't just survive, it seemed to grow stronger. The ship's hull began to glow with stored energy as its adaptive systems converted the Zephyrian attacks into power for its own weapons. "Dr. Grant," Jake said calmly, "I think we've absorbed enough of their energy. Time to give it back." Lisa's fingers danced across her console, redirecting stored energy to weapon systems. "All batteries are at maximum charge." The human fleet suddenly stopped advancing and began to glow with the same energy the Zephyrians had been firing at them. Every ship in the fleet had been storing the enemy attacks, waiting for this moment. "All ships," Jake commanded, "return fire." The space around Earth erupted in a display of light and energy that could be seen from the surface. But this time, it was human weapons doing the firing. The stored Zephyrian energy was redirected back at its source, amplified by human technology and focused with deadly precision. Kane watched in horror as her ships were torn apart by their own weapons. The energy beams that struck her vessels were the same ones her ships had been firing, but somehow they were more powerful than before. "They're using our own weapons against us," she whispered. Captain Walsh's fleet joined the attack, adding their firepower to the devastating assault. The human ships moved with perfect coordination, each one targeting specific weak points on the Zephyrian vessels. They weren't just shooting randomly, they were surgically dismantling the enemy fleet. "Admiral," Kane's communications officer reported, "the ship Valor is requesting permission to surrender. They've lost main power and life support." Kane looked at her display. 3 of her 10 ships were already dead in space, their hulls cracked open like broken eggs. The remaining 7 were taking heavy damage from weapons that seemed to know exactly where to hit them. "How do they know our weak points?" she asked. Roy Blake answered from the station on the Defiant. "We've been studying your ships for over a century, Admiral. Every battle, every wreck, every piece of debris, we analyzed it all. We know your ships better than you do." Colonel Morris added, "We know that your power cores are located in the lower hull, Section 12. We know your shield generators are vulnerable to specific energy frequencies. We know your weapons can't fire if their cooling systems are damaged." As if to prove his point, the human fleet began targeting the exact locations he mentioned. 1 by 1, the Zephyrian ships lost their shields, their weapons, and their power. They were being taken apart piece by an enemy that knew their every weakness. Kane's own ship shuddered as another kinetic projectile punched through its hull. The bridge lights flickered as power systems began to fail. Admiral, her tactical officer reported, we're down to 30% power. Hull integrity is failing on multiple decks. Kane looked around her bridge at her crew. These were the finest warriors in the Zephyrian Empire, but they all looked defeated. They had never faced an enemy that was so perfectly prepared for battle. Sir, Nina Walsh reported to Jake, enemy fleet is disabled. 8 ships are dead in space, 2 others are requesting surrender. Jake studied the tactical display. The battle was over. The Zephyrian fleet that had come to destroy humanity was now floating helplessly in space, their ships broken and their crew defeated. Admiral Kane, he said through the communication system, do you still think you're the hunter in this situation? Kane looked at her ruined fleet, then at the hundreds of human ships surrounding her. Finally, she understood the truth. The Zephyrians had never been the predators. They had been the prey all along, and they had just walked into the most carefully planned trap in galactic history. I surrender, she said quietly. Admiral Kane sat in her damaged command chair, staring at the ruins of her once mighty fleet. Her 10 strongest ships now floated like broken toys in space, their hulls cracked and their weapons silent. Around them, hundreds of human vessels maintained their positions, ready to finish the job if necessary. This is impossible, she whispered to herself. We are the Zephyrian Empire. We have conquered the galaxy. How could these primitive humans defeat us so easily? Jake Harrison's voice came through the communication system, calm and patient. Admiral Kane, we need to talk. But first, let me introduce you to someone. The main screen on Kane's bridge flickered and split into 2 sections. On one side was Jake's face, still showing that same quiet confidence. On the other side appeared a human Kane had never seen before, an older man with gray hair and kind eyes. Admiral Kane, Jake said. This is Director Sam Cooper, head of Earth's intelligence network. He has something to tell you about the real situation. Sam Cooper leaned forward slightly, his expression serious but not hostile. Admiral, what I'm about to tell you will change everything you think you know about this war. Kane's yellow eyes narrowed. What could you possibly tell me that would matter now? Your fleet has defeated mine. Isn't that enough? No, Sam replied, because this isn't just about one battle. This is about the future of every species in the galaxy. Admiral, humanity has been in contact with 43 different alien races for over 200 years. Kane's blood went cold. That's impossible. We would have detected any communication signals. Not if those communications were hidden inside seemingly normal space traffic, Sam explained. For centuries, species across the galaxy have been sending us messages disguised as merchant ship communications, scientific data, even waste disposal schedules. Dr. Lisa Grant's voice joined the conversation from her station. Every race your empire conquered found a way to contact Earth. They told us about your tactics, your technology, your weaknesses. They gave us the tools we needed to fight back. Kane looked at her tactical officer, who was monitoring long-range sensors. Are you detecting any other ships in the system? No, Admiral. Just the human fleet, Sam Cooper smiled. That's because they're not here yet, but they're coming. As if his words were a signal, new ships began to appear throughout the solar system. But these weren't human vessels. They were ships from dozens of different species, all arriving at the same time through carefully coordinated hyperspace jumps. Kane watched in amazement as the space around Earth filled with alien ships she recognized. From across the galaxy, there were the sleek vessels of the Andrali, a race the Zephyrians had conquered 50 years ago. The massive cargo ships of the Baltani, who had been enslaved for over a century. Even the small fighters of the Korth, a species Kane had personally helped destroy. Impossible, she breathed. The Andrali are extinct. We killed them all. You killed the ones who fought you openly, Sam corrected. The smart ones went into hiding. They've been waiting for this day ever since. Jake's voice cut through Kane's shock. Admiral, Earth isn't just humanity's homeworld. For the past 2 centuries, it's been the secret headquarters of the largest rebellion in galactic history. Captain Nina Walsh's image appeared on another section of the screen. Every species your empire has conquered has been sending us their best people. Scientists, engineers, strategists, soldiers, they all came to Earth to help us prepare for this day. Kane's communications officer suddenly looked up from his station. Admiral, I'm receiving reports from across the Empire. Our bases on Zephyr, Prime Conquest Station, and the Domination Yards are all under attack. Attack by whom? Kane demanded. By everyone, the officer replied, his voice shaking. Andrali ships are hitting our supply lines. Beltani forces are attacking our manufacturing centers. Korth fighters are destroying our communication networks. It's happening everywhere at once. Sam Cooper nodded. This battle at Earth was just the signal. Rebel forces throughout the galaxy have been waiting for confirmation that humanity was ready to lead the fight. Now they know, Kane realized the horrible truth. You've been organizing this for centuries. Every species we conquered, every world we destroyed, you turned them all against us. We didn't turn them against you, Jake said quietly. You did that yourself. We just gave them hope and a way to fight back. Roy Blake looked up from his weapons console. Sir, we're receiving confirmation from rebel forces across the galaxy. 17 Zephyrian military bases have been destroyed. 23 supply depots are under attack. The Empire's communication network is down in 12 sectors. Kane felt the weight of defeat crushing down on her. But why? Why would you help our enemies? You could have negotiated with the Empire. You could have found a peaceful solution. We tried, Sam replied. For over a century, we sent diplomatic messages to your empire. We offered trade agreements, cultural exchanges, even scientific cooperation. Your response was always the same. Surrender or die. Dr. Grant added, we realized that the Zephyrian Empire couldn't be reasoned with. You see other species as either slaves or enemies? There's no middle ground in your thinking. Kane's tactical officer reported, Admiral, I'm detecting massive hyperspace signatures throughout the galaxy. Rebel fleets are emerging in every major Zephyrian system. How many ships? Kane asked, though she dreaded the answer. Thousands, Admiral. Maybe tens of thousands. Every species the Empire has ever conquered is rising up at the same time. Jake's expression remained calm, but Kane could see the satisfaction in his eyes. This is what happens when you make enemies of everyone you meet, Admiral. Eventually, those enemies find each other. Captain Walsh's voice came through the communication system again. Admiral Harrison, we're receiving surrender requests from Zephyrian forces in 15 different systems. Most of their fleets are abandoning their positions. Kane looked around her bridge at her crew. They had gone from confident conquerors to defeated prisoners in less than an hour. The mighty Zephyrian Empire was crumbling around them. What do you want from us? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. We want what every species in the galaxy wants, Jake replied. Peace, freedom, the chance to live without fear of conquest or destruction. Sam Cooper leaned forward. Admiral, we're not seeking revenge. We're seeking justice. The Zephyrian Empire has caused suffering across the galaxy for over 3 centuries. That suffering ends now. Kane's communications officer looked up again. Admiral, I'm receiving a message from High Command on Zephyr Prime. They're requesting terms for a complete surrender of all Imperial forces. Kane closed her eyes. The empire she had served her entire life was finished. The war machine that had conquered hundreds of worlds was broken beyond repair. Commander Harrison, she said, opening her eyes to look at Jake, what happens to us now, to my people? Jake's expression softened. That depends on you, Admiral. The Zephyrian Empire is finished, but the Zephyrian people don't have to be. You can choose to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. What do you mean? We're building something new, Jake explained. A galactic confederation where all species can coexist peacefully, where disputes are settled through negotiation instead of conquest, where knowledge is shared instead of hoarded. Nina. Walsh added, We need former Empire personnel who understand how galactic government works. People who can help us transition from war to peace. Kane looked at the display showing alien ships from dozens of species working together around Earth. Former enemies were now allies, united by a common goal of freedom and peace. You're offering us a chance to change, she said slowly. We're offering you a chance to help build a better galaxy, Jake corrected, but only if you truly want to change. The old way of thinking dies here, Admiral. The question is whether you die with it or help create something new. Kane stared at the screen for a long moment, then made her decision. Admiral Kane looked at Jake Harrison's face on her screen for a long time. Around her damaged ship, the remains of her once mighty fleet floated in space like broken memories. Her crew watched her, waiting for her decision that would shape the future of every Zephyrian in the galaxy. I accept, she said finally. I will help you build this new order. Jake nodded. Good, but understand, Admiral, this won't be easy. Your people have a lot to answer for. There will be trials for war crimes. There will be reparations to pay. Many species will want justice for what the Empire did to them. Kane's shoulders sagged under the weight of centuries of conquest and destruction. I understand. We have caused great suffering, but I also know that not all Zephyrians supported the Empire's methods. Many of us joined the military because we thought we were bringing order to the galaxy. Dr. Lisa Grant's voice came through the communication system. That's exactly why we need people like you, Admiral. You understand how the Empire worked, but you also want something better. 6 months later, Admiral Kane stood in the Great Assembly Hall on Earth, watching delegates from over 200 species take their seats. She wore simple civilian clothes instead of her military uniform, and her title was no longer Admiral, but Representative Kane of the former Zephyrian territories. The hall was magnificent. Built into the side of a mountain in what used to be called Switzerland, it had been designed to accommodate beings of all shapes and sizes. Some delegates breathed water, others needed high-radiation environments, and a few existed as pure energy. Human technology made it possible for all of them to attend in comfort. Jake Harrison, now promoted to Admiral and serving as Earth's representative, walked to the center of the hall. He looked older than he had during the battle, but his eyes still held that same quiet confidence. 6 months ago, he began, we fought the last battle of the Conquest Wars. Today, we begin the first session of the Galactic Council. We are here not as conquerors and conquered, but as equals working toward a common future. Kane watched as delegates from across the galaxy stood to applaud. Many of these beings had suffered under Zephyrian rule for centuries. Their homeworlds had been destroyed, their people enslaved, their cultures nearly erased. Yet here they were, willing to work alongside former enemies to build something better. Captain Nina Walsh, now serving as head of Galactic Security, gave her report on the transition. Former Empire territories are being administered by joint councils made up of local species and former Imperial personnel. We've had some conflicts, but overall the transition is proceeding peacefully. Dr. Grant, who had been appointed as the Council's chief scientist, reported on reconstruction efforts. We're sharing advanced technology with all member species. Former Imperial weapons factories are being converted to produce medical equipment, farming tools, and construction materials. Kane stood when her turn came to speak. The hall fell silent as she walked to the podium. Many of the delegates had never seen a Zephyrian except as an enemy. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats. My name is Kane, she began. 6 months ago, I was Admiral Kane of the Zephyrian Empire. I came to Earth expecting to destroy humanity and add another world to our conquests. Instead, I learned what it truly means to be civilized. She paused, looking out at the sea of alien faces watching her. The Empire taught us that strength meant domination, that the strong had the right to rule the weak. That peace was just a pause between wars. We were wrong about everything. A delegate from the Andrali species stood up. Kane recognized him as Commander Zeth, whose people had been among the first the Empire conquered. Representative Kane, how do we know the Zephyrian people have truly changed? How do we know this isn't just another Imperial trick? Kane had expected this question. You don't know, Commander Zeth. and you shouldn't trust us based on words alone. Judge us by our actions. Judge us by the work we do to repair the damage we've caused. Judge us by whether we keep the promises we make today. General Amy Ross, who had been leading reconstruction efforts on former Imperial worlds, stood to address the assembly. I've worked with former Imperial personnel on 17 different worlds. Yes, there have been problems. Yes, some of them still think like conquerors. But many others are working hard to make amends for the past. She gestured to a section of the hall where former Imperial officers sat alongside representatives of the species they had once oppressed. On Androli Prime, former Imperial engineers are helping rebuild the cities they once destroyed. On Beltani, former Imperial doctors are treating diseases that Imperial weapons caused. They're not doing this because they have to. They're doing it because they want to. A small being from the Korth species raised a tentacle to speak. What about justice for those who died? What about punishment for the war criminals? Sam Cooper, now serving as the Council's Justice Coordinator, answered, We've established war crimes tribunals on 43 worlds. Over 3,000 former Imperial personnel are facing trial for crimes against galactic law. But we're also offering rehabilitation programs for those who committed lesser crimes and are willing to make amends. Kane felt the weight of those numbers. 3,000 of her former colleagues would face justice for their actions. She could have been one of them if Jake Harrison had chosen revenge over reconciliation. The goal isn't just punishment, Sam continued. It's healing. We want to create a system where former enemies can become partners in building a better galaxy. The debate continued for hours. Some delegates wanted harsher punishments for former Imperial personnel. Others worried about giving the Zephyrians too much power in the new order. But gradually, consensus began to emerge. Admiral Harrison stood to make the final address of the day. We face a choice, he said. We can spend the next century seeking revenge for the past, or we can spend it building a better future. Revenge feels good, but it doesn't heal wounds. Justice without mercy creates new enemies. What we're trying to build here has never been attempted before, a truly peaceful galactic civilization. He looked directly at Kane. 6 months ago, Admiral Kane and I were enemies. Today, she's working harder than anyone to help former Imperial worlds transition to democracy. That's the kind of change we need to see throughout the galaxy. The vote was close, but the Council approved a new galactic charter. Former Imperial territories would be granted membership in the Confederation after completing democratic reforms. War crimes trials would continue, but emphasis would be placed on rehabilitation rather than punishment. Most importantly, no species would be allowed to dominate others. After the session ended, Kane found herself standing on a balcony overlooking Earth's night sky. The stars above were filled with ships from hundreds of worlds, their crews working together on projects that would have been impossible under the Empire. Jake joined her on the balcony. Having second thoughts? He asked. Kane shook her head. No, I'm thinking about how different things could have been if we'd tried to build instead of conquer. The Empire is finished, Jake said. But the Zephyrian people have a future. A better future than anything the Empire could have given them. Kane watched a ship from her homeworld dock with a station built by former enemies. Zephyrian engineers were working alongside Androli scientists and Beltani doctors. Former Imperial soldiers were serving in peacekeeping forces under the command of officers from species they had once oppressed. You know what the strangest part is? She said. What's that? For the first time in my life, I'm proud to be Zephyrian. Not because we conquered anyone, but because we're learning to be better, Jake smiled. That's what humanity has always believed, Admiral. Every species has the capacity for good. Sometimes they just need help finding it. Above them, the stars shone down on a galaxy finally at peace.